This is an example showing the various steps in an S&OP process. The gentleman that wrote this book, the Sales and Operations Planning, the How-To Handbook, is often referred to as is the grandfather of Sales and Operations Planning. His name is Thomas Wallace, and he actually attended one of our conferences. Oh, this was about 10 years back, 10 or 11 years back. I'm sorry to say that he's actually passed on, but a lot of his work and the foundations that he was working in manufacturing and distribution carry on to these days. So with this being said, let's talk about what the individual steps are within the process. And we're going to talk about the uniquenesses of each one of them, what we're kind of accomplishing in them. By the way, as we go throughout the session today, I'm going to correlate how StockIQ supports each one of these individual steps. But let's walk through them. Step one is data gathering. So start thinking about this. We come up at the end of September. We will have accumulated all of our sales for the month. And that very next morning, StockIQ wakes up and it says, hey, I have another full month worth of data upon which I know what the sales were, and I can use that information to now project data into the future, meaning I have another month that gets added on to my forecasted plan. When we talk about step one, it's really about that timing of on a boundary when we're moving into that next period. So data gathering is a big deal. We collect the actual sales, we look at the statistical forecast and the production actuals. We have all of this information. It's what's happened. We can look back in the rearview mirror. The other thing, though, that's coming from this, and it's pointing up to step number two, is we now have a statistical forecast that's been generated to feed our demand planning process. Right. By the way, one of the outputs from step number two in the process out in here is we have a first pass on where we think demand is going to be going based on what happened last month and the revisions in our new stat forecast moving forward. This then feeds into the third step of the process, which is we need to align all of our supply, be it manufactured goods, be it purchased goods, and the current existing on hand plus anything on order to identify what additional supply planning or procurement that we need to do or manufacturing. At this point in time, we're generally at a point where we can do a second pass on the information. And by the way, spreadsheets are referred to in here, meaning that's a pretty common tool set. I will tell you that StockIQ actually generates some wonderful reports that can be shared without transporting a document around, and we'll show you what that looks like. But in this third step, we're also then have the ability to begin assessing whether or not we have capacity constraints. So when we talk about capacity, you may not be in a formal manufacturing environment, but you have vendors, you have maybe shipping constraints. There's things external to you that may constrain you from being able to accomplish your goals and objectives. We do have the ability to monitor these external sources. Maybe it's a co-packer, a co-manufacturer, and or a vendor, in addition to your internal manufacturing capacities. So we have all of this, again, the demand, the supply, the inventory. We're now ready for what we call a pre-S&OP meeting. This is where we get together with the stakeholders within the process. It doesn't mean that we're meeting with the executives yet, but it's somebody from operations, marketing, sales. It might be the NPI, the new product introduction process, in operations, where we're getting together and we're evaluating how everything is shaken out based on this new demand plan that's been created. During this process, there's typically identified 1, 2, or 3 different constraints that we really need feedback on from the executive level management to get that buy-in and to help make a decision on what to do. So what we're doing is we're getting ready for that executive meeting where the CEO shows up, the CFO, we might have the chief marketing officer in there, etc. And we're preparing for that so that we can meet that one day throughout the month. By the way, this process, this in meeting, it's a 1-hour meeting typically, so that it's efficient. We're getting in there, we're discussing things, looking at the issues, and resolution is going to pop out of that. Meaning we have a game plan that pops out. Now, you might say, hey, I have 20,000 SKUs. How in the world are we going to cover all of this in the span of an hour? Well, One of the things and uniquenesses about the S&OP process is that individual companies are utilizing roll-ups from individual SKUs. Maybe you're rolling up everything into a brand or a product family. By the way, ideally, we wouldn't want 50 of those because it'd be really difficult to analyze those. Ideally, in this S&OP process, it's recommended that you run with 8 to 12 product family groups that you can look at a high level. In those high levels, we might dive down into individual units or individual SKUs to do an assessment. But this is part of what allows us in an S&OP process is to look at our data in an aggregate view to be able to make some discernment on whether or not we need to make adjustments at a lower level. So this is the overall process that we're going through. I would tell you, if anything is going to fail in this process, it typically occurs in step number 1. So hence, here's a big shout out for StockIQ, which is, hey, we can get you all the information and it doesn't take 5 days to put it together, meaning we're not collecting information from around the organization and assembling it into a spreadsheet and having to do that multiple times, meaning we can create views inside of the software to deliver the information that's needed to support the S&OP process. And again, if we can't get that data in, I've seen this over and over again, where the effort associated with gathering that data in a timely fashion can overwhelm and the process collapses on itself. Jeff, what comments or any comments might you make?
I think you nailed it. It is definitely, like this diagram shows, sort of a ladder where you've got to go through these steps, and then each month it sort of rinse and repeat, and you do it again. And I think, as you mentioned, there's the maturity to it where you do it month after month after month, and you get better at it, and you can make improvements as you go along.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. One other thing that I'll mention in here as well is the time from step 1 to step 5. It might be as little as 4 or 5 or 6 days. It might be 7 or 8 working days. It's typically not a scenario where we go, hey, we're starting step number 1 on day 1, and at the end of week 3, we're doing our executive decision, meaning it's important for us to put a game plan in place to react quickly to what might have occurred within the overall demand plans. The quicker and more efficiently we can do this, the better the results are going to be because we're that much further ahead of the overall planning.